How you going, Andrea? You all right there? Getting out of it. Yeah. All right. I think we're going to get started. You're going to grab a seat again. Grab a coffee or a water if you need one. Now, we've called this My Share Plan Meets TEDx, which was just a bit of a creative title. But the idea behind that is to bring in a couple of really good external expert speakers on a couple of sort of key, related but slightly different topics. And the first person that I want to introduce you to is Renee Russo. Renee runs a business called Rise Up Business Coaching. I actually had the pleasure of spending a bit of time with Renee a couple of weeks ago in Florida. She was also at the Exit Planning Institute. So when I said grab a coffee and some water, sit down, get ready, buckle up. Renee is a ball of energy. She's all over everything, very active. If you want someone to follow on LinkedIn that'll keep you entertained and informed, look up Renee on LinkedIn. She posts, I would say, daily. And it's always really interesting, informative content, lots of articles, lots of stories, lots of examples with business owners of work she's been doing. So Renee is not only a CEPA, which stands for Certified Exit Planning Advisor, which is the designation the Exit Planning Institute hands out to advisors. She is also an EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System implementer. So she works with clients around their business operating system. And Renee's come up with some really interesting, I'm not going to steal her thunder, but she's come up with some really interesting overlaps between exit and succession planning and EOS, or operating systems for your business. And she's very passionate. She talks about that a lot. And so I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Renee. I'm actually going to go and sit down and listen and enjoy this as well. So all yours, Renee.
Because I'm very passionate about educating business owners around value creation and value acceleration so that as they're working hard in and on their business, they're doing so with value in mind. They're making sure that this business is more valuable over time, so that at some point they can harvest their wealth that they've created in the business. Now, normally I'm talking with a founder, owner, operator. And the beautiful thing about the work you're doing today is that we're broadening that scope of the owner to be employees as well, and people who are very much working in the business. So, to educate business owners both at the founder level as well as the employee level and really create that ownership mentality is an absolute honor. So I'm delighted to be here today. So my friend will be progressing slides for me. Um, what was your name again that is progressing slides? I'll just say next. Okay, great. Awesome. Let's do next. That'll be my cue for the next slide. So I grew up in Australia and I started my career as an accountant with KPMG, bounced around the firm and found myself through insolvency into transaction services very early in my career, perplexed and intrigued by this whole transaction that ultimately took place in many businesses over and over, and all the integration and the complexity of extracting that wealth, handing over the keys of the business to a new owner. And so it's quite interesting that 20 odd years later, here I am as an exit planner. But I didn't start out with that in mind. I actually married an entrepreneur, and it was very different being inside the business to being outside where I had cut my teeth professionally. And inside the business, it was a cluster storm of chaos. And no matter how hard we worked, it frankly didn't seem to be getting any better. So I got curious about finding better ways to run our business and found the power of an operating system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and used that as on us as the test dummy to either prove or disprove the theories in that book. And the book is called Traction. That book gave me the blueprint to run a truly great, enduring, great business. That one that we could scale, one that we could empower to run without us. And that was where I really fell in love with the power of business operating systems. So I then became an EOS implementer. And that just means I have a proven playbook that has been proven 183,000 times across the world to work in the entrepreneurial or privately held business sector. And it teaches those operators in the business to work on the business and increase the value of it, make a more scalable business, and frankly, a more enjoyable place to work by getting a lot of the basics in place to offset the natural complexity of scale. The more you scale, the more humans you have, the more complexity you have in the business. So the operating system simply helps us get clear on the vision, align with that, instill discipline and accountability throughout the organization so that everybody's executing on that vision with alignment every day, and creates a healthy, thriving culture, a place where people want to work and grow and play. And so my journey as an EOS implementer was wonderful. And then a couple of years ago, when I was working with a long-standing client, he asked me to help him sell his business. I did not know how to do that. And so I once again got curious about how that could work. And I discovered that there was a profession called a certified exit planning advisor. That simply means I work and my team work with business owners to get their house in order so that at any point in time, when they decide they want to have a transaction to harvest their wealth, sell it whole, sell it in part, sell it off to employees or management, they can do so because the business is in order, it's valuable, and that ownership is transferable. So that's how I found myself here, and it's an honor to be here sharing some of the things I've learned and I teach business owners with you today. And we'll go next slide. A lot of business operators and business owners, for that matter, are focused on driving income, driving profit to the bottom line, and so they should. What a lot are not thinking about is creating value. And it is important to recognize that over time, we want this business to become more valuable, particularly as owners, we want the value of the business to be increasing. I ask people, would you put all of your life savings in the bank account and not expect it to increase in value over time? And at some point, you'd want to take money out of the bank account? They're like, of course, Renee. That's why I would put money in the bank. I want it to grow in value. And then I ask, well, why wouldn't you be doing that with your business? And many, frankly, have not thought about that. They're going to work every day, working hard, putting in, but very few are thinking about increasing the value of the business over time. And that journey of educating owners needs to be throughout the organization when we have an ESOP in place. So we need to be having these conversations about working on the business with value in mind very early and across all levels. And so I also hope today to be able to help you find some language that's going to help you do that. And also then understand what valuation means and what we're trying to accomplish by increasing the value of the business. I want to open up the EOS toolbox to help you also understand exactly how you can use the framework to increase the value of the business and extract up to 80% more value from the business through the working on the business efforts that uncover off a lot of things beyond the financials that a lot of owners are amazed when we open up the conversation how much value lives in the business that is off the P&L. So we're going to talk about that today. So we'll go next. And one more, please. Exit planning that I do with clients is simply making sure that we have a strategy, a cadence, plans, and actions in place to ensure that the business is attractive, valuable, and transferable at any time, while also aligning with the personal and financial goals of the business owner or owners. And that is achieved by creating more and more value in the business every day. Next. So, in the conversation around equity, making sure that we're building equity, we do need to shift the focus, yes, very much including income, but also into value creation, because that is how we're going to create equity. The equity and the value of those shares in the business will only grow over time if we create value in the business. So you can have both income and good profits in the business and build equity if we focus on value. And we'll go next. So understanding valuation is something that is complicated for a lot of business owners. And I just want to recognize that for many business owners, their wealth creating potential is very much in that business. Up to 80 to 90% of a business owner's wealth is often tied up in their business. They need to not only have a plan to increase it, but at some time be able to harvest it. So we need to be getting the conversation on the table around value sooner rather than later to give business owners then the freedom to extract their wealth on their terms and their timeline. Next. It's a partnership between the operators and the owners. And in an ESOP, they are very much the same person. But we need to then make sure that everybody in those two categories, the owners and the operators, are thinking about their role, their goals, and where their focus needs to be. Operators are typically, particularly in leadership and management, are thinking about vision and execution. They're thinking about customer success and driving income. But we also need to make sure that they are building the capacity for scale and that they are driving operational excellence. And a lot of what I do with operating teams is help them work on the business with those roles, goals, and focus in mind. On the flip side, if you're an owner in the business as an employee or a founding owner, whatever level you operate in the business, we also then have the mandate of making sure that there is a long term strategy of viability for the business that is ensuring that this business is going to be standing and built to last long term. We need to be managing stakeholder relationships. Our goals here are making sure the business is sustainable and we're getting ROI on that investment. We've got a lot of resources tied up in the business. We need to make sure that we're going to be able to create ROI on that investment. And so the focus then needs to be around creating value so that we can grow equity in this business. There are very few places we're going to be able to create wealth in the world these days. Real estate, I know in Australia, real estate's expensive, just like it is here in Canada. Very difficult to create wealth. In the stock markets, they are so up and down, very difficult to create wealth. Where we're going to be creating wealth for the future and creating financial stability for people is in business. And that's why we need to get the conversation around ownership mentality on the table sooner than later. Next. So, understanding valuation, it's a scary word for a lot of people, even business owners who you'd think would know all about this. But really, what we're talking about here as we move to the next slide is recognizing that there's a financial component that drives valuation and then a multiple that is tried to applied to that financial performance. Now, the baseline benchmark of a multiple in any industry is set at a minimum. That's just a baseline. How we access more strategic value potential of a business is through that multiple. And that multiple is driven by how attractive that business is, how ready for a transfer it is, and how assured a buyer can be that this business will perform long term. So, overall, these are the factors that drive valuation. And where we want to be focusing on is what drives that multiple. So, as we move to the next slide here, businesses find themselves on a range of multiples. There's the minimum, the baseline, all the way up to best in class. You, as business owners, can drive that multiple up by simply working on the business with value creation in mind and make sure that this business is attractive and ready for that transfer. So a buyer will be willing to pay a premium for it. And as an employee owner, when you're contributing to the business, when you then decide to pull your shares out down the track, we need to be making sure that they are more valuable than when they're first acquired or given in the form of a compensation. So, moving to the next slide here, we'll talk about the 5 stages of value maturity. All I really want to leave you with here is that we need to first protect and then identify and protect that value in the business that is already here. Safeguarding the house is really important. The building value and then having the opportunity to unlock it and harvest it and then manage that value is what we're talking about in these next slides when we are really driving that value up through working on the business. Now, up to 80% of a business value can be tied up in the intangible aspects of the business. We'll talk about that on the next slide here. Driving the profit of the business and the financial performance, top line revenue, bottom line profit is a very important part of the valuation calculation. But the multiple is going to be extracted and driven up when we're thinking about the intangible aspects of value. These are the things that a buyer will find attractive in a business. They are the human capital, the structural capital, the customer capital, and the social capital. So these are the things that won't be showing up on necessarily the balance sheet or the P&L, but they are the lens through which a buyer is going to be looking at your business, and these are the things that are going to be ultimately valued. If we look at the next slide here, social capital is tied to vision alignment, values, overall brand, and reputation of your business. This is a key driver of valuation. Human capital, making sure that you've got great people who are secured with good job contracts, that have good tenure. ESOP will help you with that, and that you've got the right people in the right seats, demonstrating that we have no single point of failure and no key person dependency, i.e., a primary owner in place. When we've got an invested team in the right seats, that human capital value will increase. The structural capital is a piece that I love. This is talking about capturing your IP, your processes, and the internal organization of your business through business planning, uh, capturing data, process documentation, training your people. All that structure and wiring in your business are things that are attractive to a buyer and drive up that multiple. And then customer capital, the ability to demonstrate measurable customer retention, customer satisfaction, customer diversification, and so forth are key things that are going to contribute to that multiple. Next slide. So, how do I help business owners at all levels of a business unlock that value potential? I use a very basic, proven operating system called the entrepreneurial operating system. And when I started my journey, I was simply looking to create order in my life, in my family business. We had a photocopier dealership, and life was utter chaos. Little did I know that we were also creating value and making sure that this business was scalable. I was looking at it for survival. Turns out this operating system also unlocked our ability to thrive and scale. So if we go to the next slide here. What the operating system does is give you a lens through which to see your business through 6 components and gives you a cadence to consistently work on the business. So you can create that ownership mentality amongst your employees, because together we band together to work on the business in a 90-day world. Working in the business is one thing, working on the business is how we're going to drive value. Next slide. And so I mentioned there are 6 components that we teach a team to look through the lens of the business through those 6 components, and making sure every 90 days we're strengthening the vision and alignment with it. We've got the right people in the right seats and addressing our people issues. We've got a pulse on the data that drives the results we want, the scorecards every single week. We've got the ability to solve our issues once and for all and take action. We've got the ability to capture our IP and our processes, and we have a cadence for working on the business and keeping all circles connected every 90 days with a strong planning and communication pulse we call traction. And so the journey I and my 850 other implementers in the world, many of them are in your backyard, are taking with our clients is creating that measurable pathway towards 100% strong in each of those 6 components. And if you're using Craig's software, you will be able then to correlate that back to measurable valuation growth. Next slide. One of the tools we use to create that social capital is a 2-page business plan that everybody in the business sees, understands, and is committed to executing on. That fosters social capital because they're invested in the purpose, connected to the values, and on board with the 10-year target. And they know not only where we're going, but how we're going to get there. Next slide. It's a simple 2-page document. You might think, gosh, that looks way too easy. Populating this document is not hard. I have 3 kids under 16 and they all know how to fill it out. Aligning your team around it is not so easy. So we have to keep it simple. We spell it out and we repeat it often. We hire people who are aligned with this. We reward and recognize people who are invested in demonstrating their commitment to execute on this vision so that we can gain traction towards our goals. Next slide. Driving that human capital. If you're a Jim Collins fan, you will have read on one of the many books that I have up here, likely Good to Great. And you will have read about right people, right seats. And you probably thought to yourself, that sounds great in theory. That sounds like BS in action. Well, we've distilled this down to two simple tools that help you ensure that you are able to hire the right people, fire the wrong people, and make sure that you are in control of your people component from one day to the next, so that you can make sure before you offer those shares to those employees that they truly are the right people in the right seats and they're going to be net positive contributors to your organizational value journey. That's the human capital and how we're going to drive that growth. We use a people analyzer to assess and engage everybody in the organization with a conversation around their fit. And we make sure that they're in the right seats. No point having a person like me trying to be an auditor when I have no attention to detail. I was in the wrong seat at KPMG. What we want to make sure we're doing is aligning people's unique abilities to their seat on the accountability chart so that they can be set up to run. Getting this right is going to drive your human capital. Next slide. We're almost there, don't worry. The structural capital process component. Who loves process? Nobody, but we know it's good for us. And that's how we're going to start to create some order in the house. We're going to capture the IP, get people doing things a consistent way so we can start to get the results that we want. And that will demonstrate to a future buyer that our ability to sustain performance over time. That's going to drive value in your structural capital. This is just one example of how we drive structural capital with EOS. And the next slide will just help us identify that it really is as simple as process documentation. On the next slide, we've got a little picture there that says, this is the process, these are the steps. Digitization of this in an LMS or another platform will help you ensure that everybody's looking at the same real-time process and doing things the same way. It's going to increase your training rates, drive your execution, and ultimately help you drive your structural capital value. Last component here is the structural capital. Sorry, next slide here. Customer capital, making sure that everybody in your organization is clear on your client customer journey and understand their role in moving that customer through that cadence is going to be important. It's going to increase your lead to cash time frame. It's going to increase your customer satisfaction and increase the consistency they're going to have, so their likelihood to not only stay with you but refer customers too. Your ability to demonstrate customer success and measure it is going to be tied directly back to the ability of your team to consistently deliver on your proven process to deliver customer success. So we've got four capitals here: structural capital, human capital, social capital, and customer capital. That's what's going to drive that multiplier from baseline to best in class. Next slide here. I'll sum this up quickly to say that we run a very simplified process in the business, in the operating system mode, as well as working with business owners in their owner's box. We're not only, next slide here, discovering the value potential of a business, but we're also then doing the work to protect and build it, and then unlocking that potential for that value, the business owners to decide what they want to be doing with the business, strategically scale the business or sell it. They're in then that position to then control that conversation around when they want to make their succession. All I'll say here as we move to the next slide is that execution is everything. We can assess the value all we want, we can make the plans all we like, but the ability to drive the execution is going to be distilled down to a 90-day cadence of working on the business with value in mind. And when you've got an ESOP in place, that's a partnership, owners and operators driving value. So we've got to make this simple, make it actionable. And then what that'll help us do is on the next slide, when we're using capitalized software, and I know this is coming up in your agenda, be able to then measure that value growth over time. So on the next slide here, we're talking about measurability in that value growth. What I love about the capitalized software is that we create a valuation, we get a 52-page report, we know exactly where we need to focus to work on the business, and then every 90 days we can revalue the business because we've got an instantaneous data room and we can demonstrate that measurable growth in that value, because up to 80% of that value potential growth is going to be living in those intangibles. The trifecta, the bringing it all together piece here for me really is tied to that's 21-step roadmap we use to drive the value. Next slide. is that we need to be looking at leveraging the power of three important things. A value advisor who can work with the owners group to help them understand where the value potential is and prioritize actions around that. Second, we need an operating system in place to actually operationalize those changes, drive the actions in the business, and create that disciplined execution every 90 days. And then third, we need a platform that is going to allow us to then measure that value growth and report back to our ownership group the rewards from our efforts from working on the business. Moving to the second last slide here, a couple of resources. When I first read Traction, it was the most profound business book I had met. I had a business degree, I worked at KPMG, and I thought I knew everything about business. What I discovered was I didn't have a playbook. So in this next slide here, you're going to see the copy of Traction. This is a business book that I would give to any owner and or operator working in their business who wants to understand the model EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, how to work then on the business as well as in the business. The guide that really helped me understand the owner's journey and all the things owners need to be doing to drive the value of their business really came to light in the book Walking to Destiny. These are the two Bibles, I would say. And so if I would suggest you do anything today, it would be to get a copy of these two books and start having conversations with your owner operators who are very tied to driving the value in your business. If you would like to meet with an EOS implementer and learn more about how to implement it into your business, I'd be happy to connect you. And Craig and I can also give you access to our SEPA network, Certified Exit Planning Advisors, to help you get in contact with those people who are going to help you drive the value of your business. If you'd like slides at the end of this, you're welcome to email me at connect@riseupbc.com, and I'd be happy to share them with you. Hopefully, you've got some value from our time today. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Renee. Fantastic. We do have a little time for questions. Are you happy to take questions?
Yes, I would love that.
Okay. Any questions? It's only 9:30 p.m. at night where Renee is, and that's a bit early to go to bed. So surely there's questions.
And I don't own television, so
Just to be sure, so please ask your question into the mic, so make sure Renee can hear us. Anyone want?
Any questions? No, they're all sitting here stunned, Renee.
No one.
Are there any online?
No online question yet.
Okay. So Renee's shared the contact details. I've also got Renee's details. So if you want to find out more, I've read obviously both those books. Traction is really interesting around the operating system used to run a business. Pretty well known. Gino Wickman, the author of that book, actually spoke at the Exit Planning Institute conference last year, which was in Phoenix in Arizona, which I was also at. It was really interesting. They've built a significant business off the back of helping business owners manage sort of an operating system. And I think what Renee's been able to do is put that, the exit planning and the value acceleration piece all together into a model that works for business owners. So thanks for joining us, Renee. I know it's late at night. We'll talk soon. Thanks heaps.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having me here.
Cool. Okay, now we're going to move on. The next section, again, a fairly short segment, just focusing on salary packaging. One of the key things that I'm seeing a lot of now is people using, I won't stand in front of that, that'll be really bad, people using salary packaging to enhance what they're doing with employees. We've talked about salary benchmarking, bonuses. Obviously, we're going to spend a bit of time in a minute on employee share plans. We've been working with Easy Salary for quite some time. This is becoming more and more popular. And I'm seeing lots of, these guys are actually based in Western Australia, but they work nationally. We've got clients all over the country that use their model. This is becoming more and more popular now, and without stealing any thunder from Josh, it's really about, without costing the company any more money, how do I provide additional benefit to my employees? So that's the headline. I'm going to hand over to Josh and let him explain it to you and give you a bit of example around how it works.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Renee's a hard act to follow, so I don't have that much energy. I've got a bit of a head cold, so I do apologise if my voice comes across a bit funny. But I'm going to explain today how novated leasing with Easy can help benefit you as an employee. I'm going to explain the ins and outs of a novated lease and how you can utilise your salary to contribute towards running the car. And part of that is going to be tax-free. If we can go to the next slide, please. So normally when you buy a car, there's 3 ways to buy a car. If you go to the next slide, please. You can pay cash, which you really don't want to do because you're putting a lot of your hard-earned money into a depreciating item. If you go to the next slide, the next option, and probably the most popular option, is going to be a car loan through a dealership. Now, although probably one of the most popular methods, and there are good interest rates out there at the moment through dealers, you have to be wary because they do sometimes make you pay full retail price for that vehicle. And this is where a novated lease comes into play if you're lucky enough to be able to have this. And as was mentioned before, there's more and more businesses out there now that are offering this to retain employees, to make salary packaging a lot more attractive to their own package when they do start a job. So a little bit about a novated lease. Novated leasing's been around for about 30 years. And it was originally brought in for government employees and to help reduce the number of used cars on the road and to replace those with new cars. So now that's opened up to a whole lot of businesses, which is great news. But a novated lease, really, it's an agreement between the employee, the employer, and Easy. So we facilitate that novated lease. So if you just go to the next slide, the great thing about this is you don't pay any GST. Now, if I can just get you, if you're currently driving a vehicle, you have a vehicle under finance or you're looking at a new car, have a think about that vehicle for a second, because what we do with a novated lease is we have a lot of inclusions that come as part of this package. So we include your finance, your registration, your tyres, your fuel or electricity if you go EV or plug-in hybrid, your insurance. If we keep going, please. Yep, your servicing, your roadside assistance if you're looking at a pre-owned car, if it doesn't have roadside assistance. You can even include car washes in your package. And we've sourced the vehicle for you. And all this is done and tracked online. You have an online portal that you can log into and you can see your account at any given time. So if you're wondering how we do this, if you could just go back just one slide, sorry. If you're wondering how we do this, what we do is we base this on the amount of kilometres that you drive every year. So generally speaking, the more kilometres you drive, the more tax savings you're going to make. But we'll work that out then. So if you said to us you're going to drive 20,000 kilometres a year, we would then estimate how much fuel or electricity you might use to power that car, how many sets of tyres you might go through over the term of the lease, what your registration costs are, what your servicing costs are, and what your insurance costs are. So it's important to note that if you do consider this as an option, you can choose your own insurance or you can go with our insurance, which is an opt-in product. So we'll quote you on it, but it's an opt-in product and you don't have to take it. If we go to the next slide, please. So how it works is we deduct a portion of your salary out pre-tax, and we also deduct a portion out post-tax. And the reason we do this is fringe benefits tax is payable on a novated lease by law. So by having a post-tax deduction, it negates the FBT liability for yourself. And if you go to the next one, please. So we allow those funds to build up, and only when you need those funds can you withdraw those funds from your account. And how we do this, how we allow this to happen, is we give you what we call a WEX MotorPass card. It's accepted at 93% of service stations around Australia, and you use that card to pay for your servicing, your fuel, your car washes, anything to do with that vehicle. Another way to look at this is, and these prices are probably a little bit cheap at the moment, given what fuel rates are. If you were to pay $2 at the moment at the Bowser for fuel, with your GST and tax savings, you're effectively paying $1.40 a litre. So it's a great way to look at how much tax you can save. If you go to the next slide, please. And the next one. If we do a comparison, we're looking at a Toyota Corolla here. If you can just scroll through right to the end until that stops, that'd be great. So this particular car, just to give you an idea of how a novated lease can benefit you, this particular car retails for $35,500. Straight away, your novated price, you're saving $3,400. And if you look on the right-hand side of that column, we take a pre-tax deduction out and we take a post-tax deduction out. So what it does, it reduces your taxable income, you pay less tax, and you actually end up with more money in your account. So this is based on someone who's earning $90,000 a year, drives 15,000 kilometers, and it's over a 5-year term. So when you're looking at a lease, you can choose a term of 1 through to 5 years. And with this, there's always a residual or balloon payment at the end. If we go to the next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. So 1 through to 5 years is the term that you can choose. Now, if you chose a 5-year term, the ATO, these rates are set by the ATO, by the way. So the ATO determined that your car's going to depreciate by 72%. So your residual value is going to be 28.13%, and that gets higher the less years that you do in a term. So a 1-year term would effectively be 65% residual value. Now, this is where buying the right car becomes really important, because your residual value is based on the purchase price of the car. And because you're doing a novated lease, you get national fleet discount on most vehicles from most manufacturers. EVs are a little bit different, like Tesla don't offer any discounts at all, although they have reduced their pricing, which makes them even cheaper at the moment. But for that Corolla, that you're looking at $32,500, that residual value is going to be $10,036. And if we go to the next slide, you can see that residual value. Sorry, if you can just go back for a sec. That car actually books through RedBook as a private sale at $18,250. So this is where it becomes beneficial for you as well, because if you can pay out that residual and you're getting more money for that car than the residual value, you get to keep the difference tax-free. So effectively, if you chose the right car and you chose that car, you could make about $8,000 profit. And I've seen this happen. Choosing the right car is extremely important. If we go to the next slide, please. So that takes you to the end of the lease. So what you can do, there's 3 options. Your first option is really only if you're retiring, you can keep the car and pay out the residual value and you own that car. The second option, if we go to the next slide, is that you can keep that car and you can continue to lease it. So what we then do is we refinance that residual value, and your repayments will be at a lower rate, obviously, and you can keep driving that. So the stipulation around this is the car can be no older than 5 years old at the end of the term. So if you have a brand new car, you take it out over 5 years, the maximum you can do a new lease on will be 5 years as well. And the third option is to take out a new lease and get a new car, which is what most people do. We find about 80% of our clients will actually trade that car in or sell it privately, pay out the lease, and then start a whole new lease. So with those funds that you have accrued in your account, if there's any left, we roll that over to your new lease. Or alternatively, if you decide you want to pay out that car and just keep that car, we can transfer those funds back through payroll because it's tax-free. It gets taxed and goes back into your bank account. We go to the next slide. Sorry, just one more. Yeah, so this brings me to EVs and plug-in hybrids. So this, I'm not sure if anyone's heard of the Australian government's electric car discount scheme. So this is probably the biggest thing that's happened to novated leasing since novated leasing was brought in. With a novated lease, as I said before, FBT is payable. With electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, it's FBT exempt. So if you can go to the next slide. Yep, if you can just keep going, that's it. Thank you. So how does it work? So it has to be a full EV or a plug-in hybrid to qualify, but they become fully FBT exempt. And then that means all your repayments come out pre-tax. So your tax savings are absolutely huge. If we go to the next slide, please. So we advertise, I don't know if anyone's seen this around at the moment, we're strongly advertising you can drive a Tesla Model 3 for the same price as a Toyota Corolla. If we go to the next slide, please, again. This will just show you a brief comparison. So with the same Corolla, sorry, if we just go back one, yep. So your pre-tax deduction on a Corolla was $229, and your post-tax was $257. With the Tesla, that all comes out pre-tax. So what you can see here is your savings. This is based on a fortnightly pay, but you're going from $78 savings per fortnight to $206, and the actual running costs, the actual out-of-pocket expense to you would be less than what it is to actually run the Corolla, which is amazing. If you're talking from a $62,000 car to a $35,000 car, you can see where those savings are. If we just go to the next slide, please. So just to recap, you can choose a vehicle of your choice, and it doesn't have to be a new car. It can be a second-hand car, and it doesn't have to be for you. You can do a novated lease for your partner, for your children, for your parents, really whoever you want to, as long as your salary can dictate that it can cover the costs. You're maximising your savings while minimising tax, and there's no kilometres that need to be driven. All we do is ask those kilometres to work out your budget. You get national fleet pricing, and it's one payment every pay cycle. And if you decide to change employers, then that's transferable to your new employer if they offer novated leasing as well. You get fleet rates on the running costs of the vehicle, and the potential to keep equity within that car. Because you're paying a lower purchase price, means you can have a better residual value at the end. If we just go to the next slide, please. These are just some examples of what we're doing at the moment. Probably the majority of our business is definitely geared towards EV and plug-in hybrids. That's the majority of what we're doing. But you can save tax on any vehicle you like. So that's just a few examples. So if you do actually want to get a quote, which will look like this, if you just keep going, that's great. So once you've worked out if you do want a new vehicle or your own car, you'll get a quote like this. They're fully transparent. It shows you what your tax savings are over the term of the lease, shows you what purchase savings you're making, and it shows you the net effect it has on your current salary as well, on depending if you get paid fortnightly or monthly, and it will also show you a yearly benefit as well. And if we go to the next slide, I think that's about it. So if you do want a quote, Zena has my details, or you're more than welcome to go to our website, and there's a calculator on there where you can actually run some numbers and see if it's beneficial for you. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions?
Can I ask a question, Craig?
Sure.
The FBT exemption clause by the tax office, there is a rumor saying that they will sunset that. How would that affect in-place leasing contract, or is it only applicable for future cars?
So the FBT exemption, this stage is only until April next year. If you enter a lease that's FBT exempt, that is for the entirety of that lease. Does that answer your question? Yep.
Yep, I'm getting a thumbs up. That's good. Any other questions? How many people are using salary packaging in any format? No one. Wow, you weren't kidding. Okay, so definitely something to look at, obviously. Thanks for your time. If there's any other questions, obviously we've got all the contact details that you might need. Please send them through to me or Zena, and we'll get you some details and obviously a quote if you want to go ahead with that. As I said at the start, I'm seeing more and more people starting to use things like salary packaging as an option or a benefit for employees, and typically, well, not typically, always, without costing the company any more money, but giving employees an advantage. So certainly worth pursuing. Now, a couple of things we're going to do before we wrap things up. And we will catch up for a beer or a glass of wine or whatever after this, if you wanted to stick around and do that. But I do want to go through a couple of key things that are coming up, a bit of an update on a few things, and then I'm happy to spend some time answering any questions you like. So the first thing is the My Share Plan app. So I mentioned right at the start of the day, we're spending a bit of time, effort and money updating the My Share Plan app. And I think there's a couple of key reasons here. If you look at this very cynically from a compliance point of view, this is a compliance administration portal. I wouldn't treat it like that. I think that's 20% of what it does and why we have it. You need to have that, and it's very important that you have the compliance done, the ESS tax statements, the lodgements, all the records need to be handled correctly. That's really important. What's actually really important is using the employee share plan software to make sure employees know and understand what they've got and what the benefit is, because that's what makes the plan work. So what we're trying to do at the moment is very closely integrate. You've heard Renee mention capitalised software. We obviously use that for all of our valuations, all of our business insights reports, and our annual reviews. What we're doing now is building the new version of the My Share Plan app or platform to better integrate with Capitalise. So that if, for example, we update the valuation of your business using Capitalise, My Share Plan will get a push update automatically. You don't have to do anything. It'll automatically then update the value of the business sitting in the My Share Plan app, and therefore the value of every employee's shareholding. So that'll happen automatically. Now, we do have a few clients. The clients that are using Strategic Advisory can actually update their valuations on Capitalise every month. So if you make changes in your business, we talked before about some of those key parameters that could be changed within the business to improve the value or reduce one of those risk factors. Now that could be something that you don't even do. It could be an interest rate change. So if the interest rates come down, for example, every business value in Australia changes automatically. Now that hasn't happened yet, but hopefully it will happen at some point. When it does, the software automatically updates. If there's a change in the industry data, so in other words, if the risk of a certain industry changes up or down, or if the level of competition, or a good example is if there's new government legislation that changes how a particular industry operates or is required to do, then that will also change the valuation. And then obviously from an individual company point of view, either non-financial or financial changes that you make will also update your valuation. So those things, if you're on the software platform and you're using the advisory, that will happen monthly. At worst, if you're not doing any of that and you're just doing an annual review and update at the end of each year, then the valuation will update annually. But when it does, the employees on the platform will see on the app, on the platform, that the value of the shares yesterday was $8,200 and today it's now $9,200 or whatever the change is. Psychologically, that's quite important. Now, I'm saying the compliance is important, the tax lodgements are obviously important, etc. That is actually what's going to drive employee behaviour in the employee share plan. The fact that employees can see that the value of their shares has changed, and or if you issue new shares to them, it'll be done through the app as it is now. There'll be an offer made that they can see in the app. They can accept the offer in the app. The shares will automatically issue, the certificate will be populated, etc. What we're trying to do is systemise and automate as much as possible of that app that we can, and then also trigger, if you like, notifications and alerts in the same way that, as I said, you know, if you use CommBank or E-Trade or whatever, Macquarie Bank Trading or whatever you use to buy and sell shares, if somebody announces a dividend today, it'll show up on your phone. You log into your portfolio and go, oh wow, Westpac's paying a dividend of 28 cents today. That means in 2 weeks I'll get $280 in my bank account. We want to look like that on purpose. Now, we're not going to ever look at listed securities, obviously. We want to look at your company, share value, dividends, new share issues as a trigger and a reminder for employees to constantly think about the shares they own in your company. And we're doing this on purpose. Now, you don't have to do this. I'm not sure of a good reason why you wouldn't, but you don't have to do this. What I believe is there is a risk with employee share plans that are not active. So in other words, if you're not constantly issuing new shares, there is a risk that it becomes a little bit like superannuation. I have a 24-year-old son. You ask him how much he's got in super, he won't know. He doesn't care. Why? Because he's 25. He can't touch it for 40 years. He's sort of going, oh yeah, whatever. I know there's money going in there every quarter or whatever, it's fine, but it's not important to him right now. What I'm trying to do is make employee share ownership important to employees right now. What's in there? How much has been added to it this month, quarter, year? What do my dividends look like going forward? What's the capital gain or value in those shares? And ultimately, how do we get those employees to think and act like a business owner and get engaged with you in driving the value of the business? That's what it's actually about. Does that make sense? So, where we're at so far. We've got a couple of new features coming out. We've been spending, Mac, Yu Hong and I have been spending a lot of time with the IT developers, just refining what the software is going to, firstly, what functions it's going to carry, what it's going to do, but more importantly, what it's going to look like and how it's going to alert employees, how the data is going to be presented. Because I don't think any employee I know wants to read pages and pages of numbers. What they want to see is graphs and charts and illustrations. So let me show you where we're at. Firstly, obviously this is secure data. It's all hosted on Amazon Web Services. It requires two-factor authentication. There'll be role-based access. So for example, some of our clients have employee share plans. Their administrator, so often that'll be their internal accountant or CFO or even the CEO, will have an admin login where they can see all of the company's share plan. Who's got what shares, how many shares in total, what's the value, etc. Each individual employee will also have a login where they can see their own holdings. Employees in some of our clients might have holdings in 2 or more plans. We might have an executive plan and a broad-based plan for the rest of the staff. So if they've got more than one plan, they'll see both sitting in the software. Obviously, we've got the ability then to add, remove and manage participants, including all the electronic offer and acceptance. So instead of you sending out an email, I've had one client that had all sorts of problems sending out an email. Some employees claim they didn't get it when they should have got it. I'm sure that's not right, but they claim they didn't get it when they should have. Therefore, they didn't make the acceptance before the cut-off deadline. Therefore, we've got people coming in after the deadline trying to get shares that were already issued. Like, it's a bit messy. In an online app, none of that is a problem. The offer will come out in the app. The employee can go into the app, accept the offer. The shares will get issued straight away. It's all very clean and simple. So it should make participation management much easier. Granting and vesting, so where we've got share grants, vesting conditions, restrictions, discount clauses, bad leaver clauses, all of that will show in the app. What will also show, therefore, is if I leave this business today, I'm walking away from $20,000 in shares, for example. Communication. I think one of the things I think is an opportunity is to start to crank up the communication with your employees. This is your communication to your employees, specifically about their employee share plan. So if you work for Macquarie Bank and they make a change to their share plan, or they issue a dividend, or they make a payment, or they issue new shares, you will get notified automatically. It's pretty consistent. We're going to do the same thing. So you'll be able to make like an announcement. Now that announcement could go as far as, the way I would use this is it would go as far as just letting you know we've won a new contract today for $5 million with a state government contract. Therefore, our revenues increased by 10% next year or whatever. Just to keep people aware of and involved in what's going on in the company. Now you don't want to go over the top. We're not trying to turn this into Facebook. That's not the idea of it. But there are some significant announcements that you might make for your employees to keep them up to speed with where we're at, as well as basic notifications like we paid a dividend today, it'll be in your bank account tomorrow, and here's the dividend statement as to how much you got, what the franking credit was, what the tax implications are, etc. Does that make sense? So we're trying to do a bit of both. It's optional to you as to what announcements you make. We're not going to make announcements for you. You can decide which announcements you make, how often, what information you include or don't include. Obviously, we'll also manage all of the tax and compliance reporting. So if you have an employee share plan and there was a tax trigger that year, so that's an area of confusion or uncertainty, every employee in a share plan does not need to get an ESS tax statement every year. It's a little bit confusing. A lot of people think it's similar to the PAYG, or what used to be called a group certificate. Show how old I am. PAYG certificate each year at the end of the year covers off your earnings for that period. You only need that in an employee share plan if there was a tax trigger. Now, if you're in a share plan and you've been in there for several years and you're just earning more shares and you've got dividends, there might not be a tax trigger that year, therefore you don't need one. So I don't think every employee needs one. If the employee has a tax trigger, i.e. they left the company or they purchased shares and they've sold down or something else has happened, then they will need a tax trigger, and that'll be issued by us and it's lodged electronically to the tax office. So when they go and lodge their personal tax return, that'll automatically self-populate on their tax return. We do that for you. The other thing that you'll obviously get is things like dividends and so on. So there are compliance reports, tax documents, etc. that you'll get. You will also then have a cap table integration. So if you've got a capital table, there's a couple of people asking me questions about startups. If you've got a startup and you're getting investment in and new people added to the share register, that'll be managed inside the app as well. So you can see all of that. And then you can track equity across shareholders, investors and employees, because they might be different people. They often are. Obviously, document management. So starting to manage all of the legal and plan documents that are part of the employee share plan. So that'll include the trust deed, the employee manual, any variations or changes to either of those documents will be stored online. And if there's any other relevant documentation, it'll all be found on there. Now, we have a very selfish reason for doing that, and that is because we don't want people ringing us all the time saying, can you send me a copy of my employee manual? Because it'll be on the app. You can go and get it yourself. And that goes the same for people like Yu Hong receiving hundreds of calls from people saying, I've lost my tax statement from last year, can you send it to me? You don't have to do that anymore. You'll just be able to go into the app, get whatever you want, whenever you want it. So we've got a bit selfish reason around doing that, but it should also make everyone's life easy. Mobile friendly, so you can use it on an iPad, on your phone, obviously on a website as well, whatever suits you in terms of how that works. Data security, we already spoke about, just making sure it's obviously all secure. We will be running a program when we release the new software of training and support. So just making sure everyone knows and understands how the software works, how you use it. We'll create a few videos for you to distribute. So for example, if you sign up a new employee and you want to show them how to log in, create a user profile, use the app, see the documents, we'll create a video so you can automatically share that with them. It might be part of your onboarding process. As you join people up to the share plan, you'll send them a couple of videos to watch about how you join the plan, how it works, what it looks like, etc. Obviously, a couple of things, customization and scalability. We are building the ability to be scalable. So scalability will be part of it. We've got some very large plans with several hundred employees in them already. They are already on the old version of the app. They'll go across to the new version. We're also looking at suggestions and ideas from clients saying, well, what about, could we add this to it? Could we add that to it? And we'll be doing that as we go. Last key point, second last key point, audit trail and history tracking. So you'll be able to see a history and audit trail of your employee share plan. For some people, that's not as important. If you've got audited accounts, it is quite important. It might be important if there's a dispute with an employee or an investor about shares and holdings and amounts. So that will be that'll track that history as well. And then also we're building into the app integration with Capitalize. So it won't be in the Capitalize platform. They'll still be two separate platforms, but they will talk to each other. So as I mentioned before, if you're a client that's on advisory and you're using an advisor and they're using Capitalize and you update your valuation monthly, that information will come through to the Share Plan app. So you'll know that, you know, at the end of March, the company valuation changed from 8 million to 9 million or whatever it was. Does that make sense? So you'll be able to see, that's the dashboard. For anyone that hasn't seen the Capitalize dashboard, that's what the dashboard looks like. So you'll actually be able to see that value chart or graph sitting inside the My Share Plan app. So you'll be able to see what it looks like. Now, in terms of where the app's up to, it's currently in development. There's still a lot of work to do, but just to give you a bit of an idea of sort of what it looks like and where we're up to, it's meant to be quite graphical. I don't think many employees want to look at tables of numbers. It's not very intuitive to do that. It's quite graphical. It will be fairly generic and simple on purpose so that people can quickly and easily see, what do I own, how many shares, down the bottom, which you can see is shares that are vested or unvested, shares that are restricted or unrestricted, and where's your account position sitting at. So it's meant to look a little bit like you might see if you had a share portfolio of listed shares. What's my portfolio look like? How many shares? What are they worth? You'll be able to track the value over time. So you can see the unit value. If you're sitting in a peak performance trust, you've got a unit price. You'll be able to see what that does over a period of time. Obviously, it's not a listed company, so you're not going to track the price every day. But for those companies that are on advisory, you can track it every month. At worst, you'll be able to track it every year when we update the annual review. If I had, and I do, in Succession Plus, have an employee share plan, I would be getting on an advisory track so I could see it every month. So my employees could see it every month, not just me. So everybody can see exactly where my valuation changes month to month. In my opinion, very difficult to get employees on board helping you drive the valuation if they don't know what it is and they can't see it. It's quite a difficult thing to do. So the more transparency here, this is not giving them all the financial data. We don't do that in Capitalise either, but it's giving them enough data to know where are we at, how are we performing, and then a few of the key, this is tracking dividends, for example. So this employee can see a table at the bottom there of the dividends they've been paid, the franking credits, you know, the tax credit, etc., that comes with those dividends. So it's meant to be fairly simple. It's meant to be transparent so you can see the data, and more importantly, use it as a tool to motivate employees, to show employees their benefit. You know, all employees want to know what's in it for me. I'm in the share plan, what does that mean? How many shares do I own? What are they worth? What do the dividends look like? Etc. And that's what it's designed to do. Last screenshot. This will also track then the equity value. So your net equity value, it'll show you what that looks like. It'll also show you what it will look like if you left. And that's on purpose to say if you leave today, you're walking away from X dollars. It's probably not quite that blatant, but it's close. I've asked the programmers to make it as close to that as they can without actually rubbing it in people's face like that. But it's meant to show what the equity value is, what the valuation's done. You can see that graph will obviously come from the data that's held in Capitalise about the valuation. So the two will work together. You'll need to be involved in both to do it, but it'll work together. Same screen, different shot. Questions on the app? Release date looks like early August, but given that it's IT development, let's not write that down. It'll be sometime around then, hopefully. It's on track, it's going pretty well. Yeah, so if we're administering the employee share plan for you, you automatically get access to the app. If you're on strategic advisory with Succession Plus, you automatically get all the share plan administration and the app included in that monthly fee. So it's all in the monthly admin. It's not an extra cost to access the app. The monthly admin depends on the size of plan that you've got, but typically it's about $600 a month on average. For larger plans, it might be more than that. I think we've got a couple of 1,000 and 2,000, depending on mainly how many employees are in the plan, because there's extra disclosure requirements above 100. And then if you're on an advisory arrangement, you know, you're working on the value acceleration with a Succession Plus advisor, the share plan administration is included in that. You don't pay separately. You can have contractors in there. Yep. Yep. Yeah, if you're a subcontractor that's paid by the company, you're paid by the company somehow, you're not paid. That's called a volunteer. That's not a contractor. Right. Well, I'll catch up with you in a minute and we'll work out how we can help you with that. I'm not sure what we need to do, but I'll sit down with you in a minute. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so if you're using a Peak Performance Trust, which is our most common employee share plan, under those particular rules, you can include subcontractors. Under some of the other plans, so for example, an ESS startup plan, you have to be an employee. But under the Peak Performance Trust, which is the one that we use most commonly, I would say 90% of our plans are Peak Performance Trusts. You can use a subcontractor, yes. Yep. Any other questions on the app or in? The employees don't know. The employees don't need to pay to use it. The company pays. Right, I better talk to you about that in a minute separately without broadcasting it on the live stream. I'll come and grab you in a second. We'll see if we can help you. Any other questions? Yes. That's an excellent question. So the question is, can you use it for profit share as well as equity share? It hasn't been designed for that, but I'm just thinking if we had a class of shares, which doesn't exist, but called a profit share, and we can track then how much you pay. But all you have to track then is the amount that you're paying, and obviously that'll be included as they're treated normally as a bonus payment. So it'll go on their group certificate, not as an ESS. Profit share doesn't qualify as an ESS plan. There's no tax concessions for that. Yeah, that's a different thing. Any other questions? Are there any questions online? Okay. Well, that was pretty quick and easy, wasn't it? So, two things we need to do. You should have on the desk in front of you feedback forms. Please fill those out. There is a couple of options on there to receive further information. There's also an option on there to arrange a confidential meeting with a Succession Plus advisor to talk about an employee share plan. Either you've already got one and you want us to help you with it, or you haven't got one and you think about implementing it, or anything else you want to ask. Just tick that box and I will arrange for somebody to come and sit down with you, go through any questions you might have a chat about how we might be able to help you with either valuation, the business insights report, the value acceleration, how do you improve the value of your business, or implementing an employee share plan. If you're already a client and you want to find out more about any of those things, just tick the same box and I'll get someone in touch with you within the next couple of days to see what we can do. Michael? Yes, people online will get emailed. In fact, we can probably add it now to the chat. I'll get that done before we finish the session. If you also fill out a feedback form for us online and just send it back to us by email, that'd be great. You can send it to me if you like. I think my email details are on the slide deck. If not, you can even add it in the chat on the Teams meeting and we'll collect it from there. Other questions before we wrap things up? All good. Right, well, the next slide's really important. It says networking drinks. Now, I'm not sure if they're already there or they're setting up or they're not set up, but water and coffee. Yeah, that won't work. No one's sticking around for water and coffee. Any last questions before we chase up the drinks? We'll get that sorted. Yeah, they're coming now, I think, so that's okay. Sure. Yes. So the question was I mentioned before pharmacies, and I think also vets, where it's difficult to implement an employee share plan. The pharmacy rules, certainly in New South Wales and in a few other states as well, you can't sell equity to an individual that is not a qualified pharmacist. So most pharmacies have 2 or 3 qualified pharmacists and then a whole stack of staff that do all the other work. And so, yes, you can have a profit share model in a pharmacy, but they can't own equity. So that's quite difficult to do. Yeah, we have employee share plans in medical centres. There's no problem doing that. We have them in dental centres. We have an orthodontist in Wollongong that's got a chain of practices that we've got a share plan for. The pharmacy business itself is a problem. Under the pharmacy legislation, you can't do that. So yes, you're right. In some of those pharmacies, we've got profit share plans. That's the sort of the next best thing. The rules may change, the legislation may change, but at the moment, you can't do an equity plan in a pharmacy. Some vet clinics, depending on how they're owned, you can't do it either. Depends on the ownership structure. Most other industries you can. There's no restrictions. Any other questions before we wrap up? So if you would take some time, fill out those feedback forms before you disappear. Please stick around and have a beer or a glass of wine or whatever you want with us. Say hello to some of the team, Mac and Yuhong from the ESOP team. Michael's here and Nick as well from Capitalise, so say hello to the team before you go. If you didn't get a copy of the books, I can see lots of books on tables on the way in. They're sitting over there on that counter. Please take a copy or 2 if you want a copy of the books. They're all there for you to read. The black cover is about employee share plans. The blue cover is about succession and exit planning generally. And I think there's a purpley cover as well, which talks about the insights report and valuing a business. So either or all, I'm happy for you to take a copy of each one if you want. If you can't sleep tonight, open one of those. I guarantee you'll be fine. Perfect. Okay, so the drinks are on their way in. If you want anything else, if you've got other questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. If you're online, I'm assuming we can get Ivy to upload a feedback form online. If you can please fill that out and send it back to us either electronically or email or both. You can upload it into the chat on the online portal as well. That will be fine as well. Are there any other questions online, just to check?
Yes, there is just a question coming from Catherine. With your current 135 clients,
Yes.
are all the employees aware of their own firm have an employee share plan? Is it
I certainly hope so.
or is it a secretive? I guess
No,
the
no,
question
no,
is
no.
secretive or completely transparent?
No, if there's an employee share plan that's secretive, I'm not sure how it's working. I don't think that works at all. I don't know of anyone that's got a secret employee share plan. I don't think that works at all. All the employees should know they have to accept the offer. You can't make an employee join an employee share plan, and you certainly can't do it without even telling them. So they would have to be in the plan, and they would have to know they're in the plan. They also get tax statements and dividend statements and so on. So it'd be pretty hard to do it secretively.
For those who receive the share, that makes sense. But how about, I guess her question might be hinting is a transparency of an employee share plan visible to those who is not yet qualified? How could that work?
Okay, yeah, that's a different question, you're right. So there may be a situation where you've got 100 employees and you've got 20 of them in the employee share plan. My recommendation to clients is that everybody knows there's an employee share plan. The language that I use normally is there's no reason why anybody who works here can't be in the employee share plan, but you probably won't be all in there up front today. We're going to gradually roll it out. We're going to gradually invite more and more people to join the plan. Most of our clients have got a broad-based approach, which means a lot of their staff are in the plan. A few of my clients have got 100% of staff in the plan. Some of them have got executive type plans where maybe only the top or key sort of 5 or 10 people are in the plan. There's no benefit though in keeping the plan secret. I think I said ages ago before lunch, the best thing you want is people knocking on your door asking, how do I get in the employee share plan? What do I have to do to get in the plan, or what do I have to do to get more shares? So that's the employee you want, and that's the conversation you want to have with them around how to engage with them. Does that make sense? How's the company owner going to benefit? Giving's an interesting word. I never said anything about giving.
Yeah, well, the employee sort of seems to be getting shares, you know, not nothing such as the benefit there, but in monetary terms, the company doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. You can gift shares to the plan, which is your giving, right? That would be, I don't know, Mac, 2 to 5% of our total plans. The rest of them are acquired by the share plan, either by issuing new shares, which means money goes into the company, or by the founder selling shares, which means the founder gets money out. So they're actually sold. And under the tax rules, they have to be sold at or near within 15% is the actual technical definition. They have to be sold at market value. So you can't just put shares in there and say they're $1 if they're actually worth 20. You're not allowed to do that. If they're $10, you have to sell them at between $8.50 and $10. You can't sell them at $5, and you can't sell them to employees at 15 either. So they're meant to be at market value. So if you do it properly and you set it up, the company or the employees will make a contribution to buy those shares, and that money will either go into the company when it issues shares or go to the owner if they're selling down some shares. So it's not really, they're not getting them for free. Now the owner benefit is actually normally more about attracting and retaining key employees. Yes, they get paid for the shares, but it's really about that smaller piece of a larger pie. How do I get 10 people thinking like owners and helping me build the value because I know I'm going to sell in 5 years' time when I'm 60 or whatever it might be. Does that make sense? Yes.
My understanding of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that once an employee has been invited into the plan, they're in the plan. Obviously, for them to be invited, they need to be meeting certain criteria to be in the plan. If they're no longer meeting that criteria whilst they're in the plan, how is that managed?
Yeah, good question. So the question's about eligibility to get in, which we talked about, maybe 12 months service. And I gave an example of a client that's got, you have to have 2 performance reviews in a row above 80%, and then you can be invited into the plan. Once they're in, as you said. Now, assuming I'm in the plan and we make a contribution this year of, I don't know, $20,000 to go into the plan, if I'm not achieving my KPIs, I might not get any units in that plan that year. So I'm not kicked out of the plan. The only way to do that is to, you know, the employee resigns or leaves or is terminated. You can still do that. So if there's a serious performance management issue, it can go as far as that. The fact they're in the plan doesn't change that. But if I'm underperforming after I'm in the plan, which is your example, then I won't earn any more shares this year or next year or whatever it is while I'm underperforming. So over time, my equity will be diluted because other people are earning more shares, I'm not.
So, and I think this answers your question that you asked with the company just giving, and I think because the employee still needs to perform, and if they're not performing, then they don't get
Correct.
the dividends. Yeah.
They get the dividends on the shares they've already got,
Yeah.
but they don't get new shares. Most of our plans issue new shares every year.
Yeah.
Occasionally, somebody gets 2.5% of the shares day one, and that's it. Most of the plans, 99%, issue shares regularly over a 5 or 10 year period. If I'm underperforming in years 2, 3 and 4, I don't get any more shares. Everyone else still will. So I'm sort of diluted down. I'll still get dividends on the shares I've already got, and I'll still get, if I exit, I'll still get paid out for those shares I already got, but I'm not earning new shares.
Yeah. So that employee's got to continue to add value to the business
Correct.
for them to be rewarded for it.
Yeah, and that's why I said initially, you want to be considered and strategic in who you add to the plan over time. I have a view that you can add most employees in most businesses, but they don't have to be equal either. That's the other important point. So your senior staff will nearly always have more shares. You saw the example of salary times a performance score. So more senior people that are better performers will end up with more shares than more junior people that aren't as good performers. It'll automatically work through the plan over time. It's meant to do that, designed to do that. Yes.
So when this sort of system starts, they'll get to a point where the shares start to, well, the percentage of the business owned by employees will start to accumulate.
Yes.
Is there a mechanism in there to cap that or to ensure that that just doesn't keep getting accumulated to the point where they own a really large portion? Yeah,
so there's two scenarios there. One is I've got clients who are selling the entire business to the employees, so there's no cap. The cap is 100%. So in other words, over time, and that when I say over time, that might be 7, 10, 15 years, not 6 months. Over a long period of time, the employees in those clients will end up owning the entire business. We've got a few clients like that. Most of our clients have a cap, and the cap might be 10 or 20%, where the employee share plan continues to buy shares until we get to 10% and then it stops. Now, some clients have started with 10%, reviewed it and gone to 20. Others have just said, no, it's 10%, that's the cap. So sometimes you just have a cap where the employees own 10% and you or the family or the founders own the other 90%, theoretically, forever.
Okay. So with that, when the employees are receiving their performance bonuses and they're given that in some sort of share equity, does that just go into the trust and then get just distributed to them in a cash sum, or do they take on more of the other employee shares, or how does that work?
No, they end up owning units in a unit trust, which holds the proportion of shares. So if you own 10 units, that means 10 shares. They have to be 1 for 1. So if I'm in an employee share plan with 5 other people, and I own 20 units and everyone else owns 20 units, there's 100 units, that means I've got 1/5 of the equity owned by the share plan. So each year, the share plan could do 3 things. There'll be more contributions, either from me or the company or a bonus or whatever, and we'll buy more shares. So I still own 20%, but we've now got more shares. Number 2, the value of those shares will go up. So my 20% was worth $10,000, now it's worth 12. And thirdly, they'll pay a dividend on the shares that I already own, so I'll earn income off those shares as well. So those 3 scenarios are most likely, and or somebody could leave, including me, at which case there's a payout.
Sure. And what would you do in the scenario where you've hit the equity limit, that you're willing to forego.
Yep.
But then you have an employee who's come into the mix wanting to and is now eligible for the share plan.
Yeah, so the employee share plan trust structure has an inbuilt succession capability. So what will generally happen over a longer term, you'll have employees leaving. They'll retire, they'll go and have a family, they'll do whatever they're going to do. And then as new people come in, they can be added to the plan. But even if no one leaves, let's assume we've got a business that owns 20% and no one leaves, ever. Perfect scenario, right? Maybe. Then what we then get is we've got value building up in the business and we've got more and more people in the team. It's well worth bringing that person into the share plan. It will dilute everyone else's percentage, but not the dollar value. The value of the company's going up because we're adding more people, we're building, we're growing value. So I've got 20 people in my plan, they own 20%, that's worth $2 million. I now bring in person number 21, everyone's percentage goes down, but the only reason I'd bring that person in is if they're adding value to the company, therefore the dollar value goes up. So you might go down in percentage, but as I said before with dilution, percentage is a bullshit number. It doesn't mean anything. Psychological, it's not anything else. There's a dollar value that actually matters, which comes right back to that, smaller piece of a much larger pie. Does that make sense?
So as a company owner, I could say, well, you and you, but you can't,
Probably wouldn't say it like that, but yes, you can select.
so every employee's not easy to get on.
Sure.
There's some there that are great people.
Yep. So just repeating the question, you can, as an employer, you can select, we call it invite, but same thing. You can select which people you want to invite into the plan. So just because I meet the criteria of 12 months service or performance score of X doesn't mean I'm in the plan. I still have to be invited, and nearly all of our share plan deeds have a clause that allows the employer, the company or you, to invite employees to join the plan. It's never automatic. I don't think we've got one where there's an automatic entry. They're always by invitation. Yes.
There's a question from online from Peter Moriarty. What is the purpose of the unit trust? Is that to simplify things to voting in the constitution or shareholding agreements? I guess it's actually also part of my personal understanding. So the shares are not allocated to...
Let me answer Peter's question before I do yours. Let's not make it too complicated. So the reason we use a unit trust, there's about 5 reasons, but the main reason we use a unit trust is for simplicity of administration. When you look at a company, and let's say we've got a family that owns that particular company, the only thing we're doing is adding one new shareholder. That's the trust. The individual employees own units in the trust, not shares in the company. Now that's important for a number of reasons. One, it's much simpler. On your corporate structure, you're adding one shareholder, not 10. The second thing is, from a compliance point of view, if you add people as direct shareholders, there's a couple of implications. One, that's public record. So as soon as you add a shareholder on any company register in Australia, you can do a company search for $10, you can get all those details. Most companies don't want their competitors or even their internal employees to know who owns shares and how many and when they got them and how much they paid for them and so on. As soon as they're direct shareholders, that's public record. So the unit trust also gives you confidentiality. The second thing is we've got a couple of large plans. I've got one with nearly 300 people in it. Every time someone moves house as a direct shareholder, I have to notify ASIC. In a unit trust, it's not a public record, so I don't have to notify anybody. So that can be quite an expensive issue as we get a larger plan without the trust. The last part of it really just is simplicity in managing unit holdings, issues, etc. None of that's public document. It's much easier to administer than direct shareholdings. There are some clients, we've got a couple of plans, as I said, with more than 100 people. That automatically then qualifies them as a public unlisted company. That becomes costly and etc. etc. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that answered my question as well. But your annual fee of running the plan for the clients, including covering all those overhead of managing the unit trust, is that right?
Yeah, that's all part of the administration on the platform. Yep, absolutely. Yes.
So let's say I sell over time 100% of the shares into this unit trust.
Yes.
As a succession to the shareholders. Sorry, the staff.
Yep.
How do the staff eventually get those shares? Because right now, the unit trust owns 100% of the business.
Yeah.
I've nicked off to the Bahamas.
Yep. Good on you. Yep.
And
Thanks for the invite. Yep.
There must be an end point where
Okay, so the question was, if we transfer 100% of ownership to the employee share plan, we've now got a unit trust that have got whatever number of employees in it. That unit trust owns all the shares in the company. Now, the way that trusts work, under the trust law, the trust itself is a separate legal entity. The only thing the trust is allowed to do is own assets, in this case the shares in your company, for the benefit of someone else. And the someone else is the unit holders. They're called beneficiaries. In this case, unit holders, beneficiaries is the same thing. The trust itself, it's a trust. That's what trusts mean. So trusts were started way back in the Crusades. Literally, when knights went away to fight in the Crusades, they would put their castle in a trust that their neighbour administered for the benefit of their wife and kids. Literally, that's how they started. They're still the same. So the trust owns the asset, shares in your company, on behalf of and for the benefit of the unit holders. It cannot do anything else. The trust deed is really specific, which means the employees never need to own the shares. They don't. In most of our clients, they will never own the shares. They will always own units in the trust, which represent the shares that are held by the trust. That's actually better from an asset protection point of view anyway, but that's not the reason we do it. As I said before, it's about simplicity and structure. So the trust deed says that if you own one unit, you have all the beneficial rights of the underlying share. So it's the same thing as owning a share. Sorry? It's not a benefit to the public, it's a benefit to the unit holders in the trust. So if you're a benefit, even if you look at things like a family trust or a unit trust, most self-managed super funds are a trust structure. They're holding assets for the benefit of someone else. In this case, the benefit of your employees. Sorry? No, they're a pass-through vehicle, so they don't pay tax. None of our employee share plans pay tax in their own right. They pass... No, the trust doesn't pay tax. Yeah. Trusts don't pay tax. Trusts pass the tax through to the beneficiaries, to the unit holders. They don't pay tax. Unless they retain income, which they're not allowed to do. Yes. Company still pays tax. It doesn't change the company. Yeah. So now we're getting a bit complicated, but that's okay. It's okay. The company doesn't change. The company still runs the business. It owns the assets, it makes profit, and it'll pay tax on that profit. It will then pay a dividend, which is part of the profit, up to the trust. That dividend has a franking credit, the same as a dividend paid by Westpac. It then has to pass that profit out to the beneficiaries. It can't retain it. It's not allowed to. So there's no trust event, there's no taxing event in the trust. It's a pass-through vehicle. So it passes it out to the employees. Geez, now I really need a beer. What else have we got? And the beers are here, which is even better. Any other questions before we wrap things up? I'm happy to answer any other questions separately. Are there any others online? I am going to need a beer in my hand before I answer questions about special purpose trusts. That's not being done now. I'll come and talk to you in a minute.
Just a few comments. Obviously, Craig, you earn a few online fans today and a lot of love hearts flowing to your way. And Peter Moriarty saying that the trust model obviously will save his company a lot of administration overhead.
Absolutely.
And Dean Holmes from online saying he'd love to learn more about this trust model for his own clients. So
Sure.
you have an agent now.
Sure, no problems at all. If there are any other questions before I wrap things up? Okay, please fill out the feedback forms, grab a book if you'd like a book, tick the box if you want someone to come and talk to you about an employee share plan. If you're online, we'll make sure that you get that form either in the chat or emailed to you straight away. Please fill it out, send it back to us. Happy to talk to anybody, but I will need a beer in my right hand before I do that. Thank you for coming along. I hope that's been helpful. If you need further information, reach out. We're very happy to help. Thanks for coming today.